Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 19 of the Whitey and Wills Sports Show. It is Sunday, January 23rd, the evening of January 23rd, and we are back with a guest. Mike, we do better numbers when we have a guest, and I think we're going to do good ones with this one today. It's somebody who people who are familiar with the basketball scene in Effingham from a few years back. It's a name they're going to recognize, I think. Mike, I'm going to let you do the honors and introduce because this is a close acquaintance of yours.
Well, we'll start off with his official titles. Director of Basketball Operations at the University of Tulsa. Is that correct, Will?
Yes, sir.
This is Will Bartlett. I have known Will since he was born. So, Will, what month were you born?
January.
So you're the one who almost made me coach in a game.
I think so. Yeah.
Early January?
Yep, January 5th.
Okay, because we were at the Charleston Holiday Tournament and your dad thought the day was going to be when we had to play Effingham, and that was the first time we played Effingham in like 20 years, and I was a little nervous. And
I was a Christmas baby, and my dad, I think, was glad that he got through the holiday tournament.
Yeah, he was nervous, and I was nervous,
and
so that's good.
And just to make sure everybody's on the same page, although I think most people who are watching this are going to know who Will's dad is, but Dave Bartlett, of course, the former boys basketball coach at St. Anthony High School. It's a little before my time as far as paying attention to the sports scene, but certainly as a former staffer at the Effingham Daily News, a name that I heard bandied about once or twice. So Will, thanks for joining us tonight. And Will's actually the first of two guests that we've got scheduled for tonight. So we're going to talk to Will for about a half hour, and then we've got Kurt Becker coming on after a little while. So a couple of guests, and we should jump right into it. Will, I want to get started if you don't mind, because until recently, Director of Basketball Operations is not a title that I was really familiar with on a college coaching staff, but it's something that I hear more and more. And I'm just curious exactly, first of all, how it came to be that you got this title, and then what it is that a person with that job does.
Sure. I guess I start from the beginning. It's not a super glamorous story, but after we moved from Effingham to Macomb, I knew pretty young age that I wanted to be in coaching. Obviously, with my dad having me at the gym all the time in St. Anthony, something I was passionate about. I was not blessed with incredible basketball skills, but I guess relate. Knowledge. Yeah. And so I knew from, when I started high school, I had to be creative, I guess is the way to phrase it, how I'd get into college coaching. And so my foot in the door was actually to be a student manager. So I went to the University of Missouri. I was a student manager for 4 years, and then had the pleasure of staying on as a grad assistant with Mike Anderson. And then he took a job at the University of Arkansas and brought me along with him as a support staff member. And I was there for 8 years and a variety of titles. And then was brought to St. John's University in New York, where I was director of player development. And then this past spring, I was approached by Coach Haith here at the University of Tulsa to come on staff, be director of ops. So director of ops is kind of a job you wear a lot of hats, and you really handle all the day-to-day logistics of a basketball program, whether it be scheduling games or practice time, reserving gym times, travel logistics. And obviously with COVID, that becomes kind of a ever-evolving process. So that's sort of the short answer. It's actually a long answer, but my dog is howling in the back.
Well, that's okay.
So you're just, really, with everything, you're the traveling secretary. Now, scheduling, you're in charge of scheduling the gym time, scheduling film time, all of that.
Scheduling opponents too, yeah.
Oh, so you get them, so you reach out to the schools who you want to play?
Yeah. So with my job, one of my responsibilities is scheduling games. And I did some of that at St. John's as well, non-conference games. And obviously, you have to handle the budget as well, and field a competitive schedule and make it work with it within your budget and within the confines of what your league wants to do as well.
So do you reach out to Bill Self and just ask him if he's got any open dates, or?
Well, we're not. Yes, we do a lot of cold calls. We actually, it's, they are a local team, and we had a scrimmage with them this fall here at Tulsa. It's supposed to be one of those closed scrimmages, but after the fact, we can, I guess, discuss it. But we had a closed scrimmage with Kansas this fall. So yeah, you run into a lot of those guys, and scheduling is fun. It's a fun thing to do, and it's a good way to network too. We're kind of kindred spirits. We all kind of are aiming for the same goal, but making games happen is a pretty fun deal.
So really, you're just reaching out to director of basketball operations at other schools as well.
Yeah, you kind of identify pretty quickly who handles scheduling. Sometimes at other schools, assistants will do it. It's kind of 50-50. Director of ops will do it. Sometimes the assistants, or at some levels, the head coach will do it too. So that's another way. During COVID, it was such a free for all in that first year, and you're talking to, it seems like, hundreds of schools trying to make stuff happen. But yeah, sometimes the head coaches handle the schedule as well, and Coach Haith works with me on that too. So I'm not just going to schedule a game without talking to him first, see what he wants to do.
Now, he was at Missouri prior to, I know it was prior to Tulsa, but was that his next step?
Yeah, so he in 2000 and I want to say 2011, when Coach Anderson took the Arkansas job, Coach Haith was at Miami, and then he replaced Mike Anderson at Missouri. And so I met Coach Haith on his way in, and I was on my way out. So the timing didn't exactly line up, but I've known Coach Haith for a while, and he did an awesome job at Missouri too.
I mean, seems like a good guy. I've heard him spoken well of on TV. So going from the Big Apple to Tulsa, how much of a culture shock was that?
It should be how big of a culture shock it is going from Macomb, Illinois to the Big Apple. My wife's actually from Tulsa, so that from that standpoint, moving from Queens to Tulsa was pretty seamless. Moving out there was, I mean, it's New York is an unbelievable place. It's a challenge. It'll challenge you, day to day, logistics, living, cost of living, but unbelievable stage for basketball. And really happy I got to spend a couple of years there and learn and see a whole different perspective of college basketball.
So when you're in a game situation, or even practices, what's your role like when the actual basketball is happening? What are you doing then?
Yeah, so that good question. That is that usually varies from staff to staff. Here at Tulsa, I'm more on the administrative side of things during practice. There is a limit on how many coaches can be on the floor. So you get 3 assistant coaches, and the head coach can be on the floor. So kind of got to be off to the side in sort of an advisory role. Can't be out on the court doing drills. That's the NCAA rule. But they're trying to get that passed. And I think that's a good rule for young kids and young staff members trying to get onto the court. That's a hard barrier to cross. But yeah, so during practice, I'm there. I go over the scout on the side and just watch. We meet as a staff too before and after practice. So we get together on things, and I'm just a set of eyes on the side during practice.
Because
you're also in charge of film, aren't you, Will? Is that part of your?
Not so much anymore. That was at St. John's. That was one of my duties too.
Oh, okay.
That's interesting. You said that was kind of my niche to stick around in college basketball. That kind of gave me a role. I found that to make myself valuable, and it helped me learn so much. When you're doing film, you're cutting up, not only your self scout but opponent scout too. So that was an awesome way to learn. I still do some film on the side.
Do you find that as a coach's kid, did you find that like you picked up some of those skills from home? Like I'm sure your dad broke down game plans and stuff like that, and you weren't coming into that cold. But I guess how much of that, how much stuff from your childhood have you put into play, professionally?
I was really young in Effingham when my dad was coaching, but
Yeah.
the main thing that I brought, from my dad, um, it just made me so passionate about basketball. And in Effingham and in T-Town and all throughout Illinois, when I grew up, college or high school basketball was like, I mean, that was it. That was the thing. At least how I felt. I couldn't wait for Tuesday night games, Friday night games, holiday tournaments, running around like crazy at my dad's practices. That to me was that really. I mean, it's they say it's in your blood. That'll stick with me forever. That's why I'm passionate about it. I just grew up around it. But my dad is he's not a coach, but he certainly is not short on basketball opinions, and he watches all of our games too. So he's like Tulsa's biggest fan, and we still talk basketball every day. We talk after every game, every night going home. He wants to talk hoops, and so he's certainly plugged in. But yeah, I still take bits and pieces from my dad. I can't remember X's and O's, but I remember the players that he had around, and that really stuck with me forever. Like Pete Busher was my idol growing up, and I just couldn't get enough of being around the guys and the players, and I just looked up to those guys, and I think that just stuck with me forever, and it just made me want to keep doing this.
Yeah, and when you say that, I mean, it is. When I first started, I remember sometimes, dragging my son Zach in to practice just to be around it. And Zach had no interest in basketball. He, played football in high school, but I mean, he'd be the kid. Pretty soon you'd look over and the seniors or the kids had him locked in the ball rack or something,
Yeah.
But that's a big part of it when you're around it. And like I said, you see those kids and they're bigger than life, I mean, and like I said, that's the group your dad took to state. That was, I think, I'd been gone 2 years because I just started coaching again after getting my master's. So, yeah, and being around your dad, you can't help but learn. Well, I mean, I learned so much coaching with him those 4 years. I mean, we had a blast together. We really did. But I mean, he was a good coach. He really was. He was very prepared, and I learned a lot. So, and I know, like I said, you hanging around practice and seeing these kids. Were you what, first or second grader when you guys left for Macomb?
I left when we were going into 5th grade.
Okay, going into 5th grade. I didn't know how far down the road you were. Okay.
Yeah. Some of my fondest memories of growing up were, riding with my dad and Joe Griesbaum and Dave Woltman to go scout. I thought that was just the best thing ever. Oh my God, this is your job. You get to go watch games. I was probably more of a nuisance than anything. Definitely wasn't any help, but I was hooked from the start.
Knowing that crew, I'm sure you heard some very interesting conversations on the way to and from games too.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pull this up right now, Mike. Seems like a good time, good segue for this one anyway.
I was still on the staff then, so that's probably Will's. I'm guessing 1, maybe almost 2.
Yes,
I've seen this picture. This is actually hanging up in my dad's office in our basement.
Yeah, that's. I'm looking. Kirk Hartke, is that the name in the cut line?
Yeah, Kirk graduated in '89.
Okay, gotcha.
That was the year.
Hoosiers.
What's that?
That picture looks like it's straight out of Hoosiers.
Well, that's the year we won their first regional. When I was on staff with your dad, it was the first time we beat T-Town in about 10 years. Yeah, that was the group I came in with as freshman and was under your dad as freshman coach 1 year, and then JV coach the next 3, and dealt with all those kids. So, yeah, that's in the old golf gym too, because you left before the new building was built.
I still think of golf gym all the time. It felt like it was 1,000 degrees in there. I thought it was Cameron Indoor Stadium. To me, I thought
It was it was an awesome gym. The atmosphere was always good, and I loved the balcony. You'd have a lot of times that would be some of your older fans would be up in the balcony, and they were just as passionate as the kids. It was a fun gym. It really was.
Yeah, Greg and I on the air were the other day just trying to kind of piece together when they stopped using Goff. And I remember I graduated in 2002 and remember going to games there, going to see Neoga play there. But then by the time I was at the Daily News in 06, Inlow Center was open. So it
was probably
when I was a junior, maybe in high school.
Yeah. And we were talking
before maybe.
On. Yeah, you graduated.
3 or 4 is when it opened. Because I think Ronnie Nieberg coached the first year in the new building, and then I took over those next 3 when he moved to an administrator's role. I still remember the last game in Goff. It was, we had a big to-do about that. And all these old people wearing their Letterman's jackets from the 50s, and it was just, and then we didn't play well for a half, and then it was a great game. Casey had a really good team, but I remember just just an incredible atmosphere, and it was hard to beat that building for a good basketball game. It really was.
No doubt.
Now, Will, when you were manager first at Mizzou, you were with Quinn Snyder, correct?
My freshman year was Quinn Snyder. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And, he resigned in like the second week of February, my freshman year. And then, so we had an interim coach, and then Mike Anderson came along at the tail end of my freshman year. And then he was there 5 years.
Now, had Mike been at Arkansas on Nolan Richardson's staff at that time, or had he been somewhere else before he came to Mizzou?
So when he took the job from Mizzou, he left head coaching spot at UAB.
Okay.
Effingham.
Okay.
They were fresh off of a postseason run that year.
So here's a tough question. Your first year as manager under Coach Snyder. This is the toughest one I'll throw at you tonight. Who wore more hair product, Quinn Snyder or Dave Bartlett?
You're gonna get me in trouble here with my parents. My dad didn't have enough hair to do the product. That's an easy answer.
Yeah, that'll be his answer. He said, that's an easy one. So was it a tumultuous kind of ending there with Snyder? I don't remember all the details, but I remember, it wasn't a good ending.
I was so green. I was a freshman in college. I was treating that job like it was the most important thing in the world to me. So I was scared out of my mind to take a wrong step at the office anyway. So I wasn't paying too much attention to that. I was just trying to be there on time and
right.
do my manager duties. But looking back, it probably was a little bit chaotic. Yeah.
Have you ever had any correspondence with him at all since he left?
Yeah. He doesn't. He pretends he knows who I am. I saw him one year in Summer League in Vegas. I went out there to watch NBA Summer League, and he was not coaching, but he was watching another team. I think he was a head coach at that time, but he was at the gym at the Thomas Mack Center. And I went up to him and said hello and reintroduced myself. I was one of 4 managers that year. So he said he remembered me. And prior to that, I would send him emails and handwritten notes. And he responded a couple times, but he was always real cordial to me. And he's killing it in the NBA, which is no surprise. He's brilliant.
So working with Coach Anderson, he brings, he's off that Nolan Richardson tree about, 40 minutes of hell. I can only imagine how intense those practices are with the style of play he wanted to play.
Yeah. Practices were a battle. A lot of up and down. That was something different to me. We scrimmaged half of practice. And when I first saw it, I was like, wow, this is crazy. But it became second nature to me. Practices were really, really competitive. And so, one thing that helped every player on that team or part of his program, it was it was almost game reps for them daily. And it was no set scout team or anything like that. So different combinations of guys playing together, and practices were really unique, but really up and down, hard nosed, tons of scrimmaging.
And like I said, that was always his style, and always a fun group to watch. And like I said, even when he was at when you guys were at St. John's, you had a kid last year who can just flat score at will. Because I saw you guys quite a few times last year. Now you guys played at Indiana last year, didn't you? Or 2 years ago?
We played when we were at Arkansas.
Okay.
We played Indiana in the NIT.
Okay.
St. John's played at Indiana earlier this year.
Yeah, that's right. I saw it this year. For some reason, I thought there was a game in the last year or two. They've also played together. So, so all your travels, all your different venues. I mean, you've seen some of the hallowed grounds of basketball. What place did you walk into and just kind of in awe looking around?
For me, my my freshman year, when the first time we went to the bragging rights game, that's an unbelievable atmosphere. And especially for me being an Illinois kid, I grew up, rooting against them. That's probably an unpopular thing in Effingham and P-Town and around back home with you guys. I was a Mizzou fan, and but that was such a huge environment. And the year before Illinois had been to the championship game. So that was my first taste of it. And matter of fact, my first road trip as a manager was to Arkansas. So it's a small world. Everything kind of comes full circle in basketball, but that's one of the perks of the job is, getting to travel and seeing all these big time atmospheres and different gyms. We played at Indiana in the NIT, and that was really cool for me too. Just that building's like a time capsule almost.
And it's such a cool place to watch a game because everyone's when you're in the upper deck, you're almost hanging out over the floor. It's a barn.
Yeah,
it's really neat.
It's a barn. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Mike, Will used the phrase time capsule right there. And
yeah, we've got a time capsule picture for him here.
This
is my wife's doing, Will. It wasn't me.
I'm going to do this. Here we go.
Look at that.
I mean, this is taking a lot of people back here,
Well, yeah, only one person looks the same, and that's the bride. So everyone else is struggling there.
Yeah, I don't know. The guy in the tux got something on his face. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. But
that was moons ago. And this next one, he's got a little confident walker. Look at that. He's got a good quick first step. He's walking right down the aisle.
I think you could tell probably the story. I was bribed.
Yes, he was. He was bribed
in that. I was bribed with a gigantic Ninja Turtle.
Yes.
Donatello. I still have it.
About yay big. I remember that was, I think, the rehearsal dinner. We finally gave it to him, and we didn't see Will for about an hour. Him and this Ninja Turtle were gone, So he did a bang up job. Doug Mimoser's wife. There's just coaching stuff everywhere in these pictures, So, or Doug's daughter, I should say, Doug's daughter, Diana. So,
what year was that, Mike?
That would have been 91. No, yeah, 91.
Okay.
Yep, 91. I was had left St. Anthony. I was coaching at Hudsonville at the time. I maybe wasn't even coaching then. I maybe was the athletic director. I don't remember. I think I was coaching still because I coached 2 years and then was the principal 1 year before I came back to the area. Different, a little different part of the world over there for basketball. It wasn't quite the same as what I'd learned at St. Anthony. But yeah, that was a few years ago, and Will did a bang up job. With the Ninja Turtle was well worth it. He fulfilled his role, and it was good.
So Will, how do you feel like it's, relatively new at Tulsa? How do you feel like it's going for you there? What are the early returns in this gig?
I'm enjoying it. New responsibilities. It's getting to learn from a new staff. Love the guys I work with. We've had some COVID challenges this year. So again, that's another learning curve. But no, it's good. The athletic department here is a smaller athletic department. So it's a tight knit community. So I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah.
So director of basketball operations, is that the next step then becoming one of those three assistants? I mean, as the ladder goes up?
There's not necessarily, one thing I've kind of learned is there's no set path to being a
Okay.
college coach. The main goal is just kind of hang in there, and keep your head down and do the job. That'd be nice, but that's not something I'm worried about right now. I'm just making sure our plane is here on time on Tuesday to get us to Tulane.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a big responsibility. So, granted, this isn't in your power. So you get to your hotel and down at Tulane, down in New Orleans, and hey, Mr. Bartlett, sorry, you asked for 12 rooms, but due to a staff shortage, we only have 7.
Yeah.
And now everybody's looking at you because you're the man.
Yeah. You got to have big shoulders to be director of ops or be good at hiding.
There you go.
This year we had a neutral site game scheduled against Colorado State down in Fort Worth at Dickies Arena. And that was important to us to get a high caliber game and also get into the gym that we're eventually going to be in for a conference tournament. And we're about 20 minutes from Fort Worth, and I get a call and, hey, this is Colorado State. We have COVID problems. We will not be making the game. So we had to be pretty quick on our feet. We ended up staying the night, trying to find an opponent. It didn't work out. Practiced the next morning in Fort Worth at the arena and took the bus home the next day. And our following game had been canceled as well. So had an earlier Christmas break, but that's just been kind of,
there's nothing you can do. So was it the day before the game you got the notice, or the day of?
The day before.
Okay.
Day before. But I'm not a stranger to the COVID stuff. My dad and Mike Haney were actually in Madison Square Garden for the Big East tournament game. St. John's, we were playing when I was at St. John's, we were playing Creighton, and the game got called off at halftime. That was the last game.
Yeah, I remember that.
Wow.
So we got out of there with a half of a win. But yeah, I mean, ever since then, it's just been just very, 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 tentative.
Yeah, well, those pins. Was your dad able to lose Mike Haney and come back without him, or did he unable to do that?
That whole weekend was wild because they had planned to stay through the duration of the tournament, and the game got canceled. And they were having a hell of a time, and I was like, "You guys need to go. You need to get out of New York City. This is not an ideal place to be right now."
That was almost ground zero at the time.
Yeah, we'll just hang out and go watch, the rest of the conference tournament games at your apartment. I said, this is it. There's no more. We were the last game to be played. It's over.
I remember watching that. We're like, oh, now this is canceled. Now this, and it's like, okay, so I think the NCAA canceled the next day.
Yeah, the following day. So they got on a standby flight. Our game was at noon Eastern time, and they got on a flight. Haney, thank God he knows how airports work. He and my dad went to LaGuardia and got home, and then 2 days later everything was shut down, and I hopped in a rental car and drove back to Tulsa. We stayed at my in-laws' house. I thought it would be 2 weeks, and we were there till July 10th. So
wow.
We were doing recruiting over Zoom, meeting over Zoom, X's and O's over Zoom. It's just, I hate saying the new normal, but we've gotten used to finding ways to get things done.
Yeah, that's amazing. That really is.
Well, Mike, we've got Kurt waiting on us. So
all right. Well, we'll wrap Will up then. Well, Will, I want to tell you something. I appreciate your time. Your dad did volunteer and say you would be on. So, that's good. And I knew you would. He said you'd love to do it.
Oh yeah.
And I have watched a couple Tulsa games recently. I guess my Hulu has like 400 different versions of ESPN because I have like 20 college games on. So I'm dialing through and well, I talked to you the other night after your game, day after your game. You guys lost a heartbreaker, and so yeah, I catch you. I make sure I see you in the background there. So
I appreciate that.
I hope to see you keep moving up the ladder. That would be wonderful, and you know, I promise that I will gig your dad as well when I have him on as a guest.
I'll tune in for that one too. That'll be a good show. He's got a lot more stories than I do. People in Effingham probably remember me as the brat that was running around golf gym.
Yeah, he's a little kid running around golf gym. Oh, it'll be fun. Well, hey, have a good rest of the season. Let's hope when you get through this season, you don't have to deal with anything like this ever again.
That's right.
Because I can imagine the stress is incredible when you're trying to put together a trip and not knowing, if all the dots are going to fill in.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're probably hopefully out of the woods soon, but it is good to just get games getting played, and it's good talking to you guys too. Yep. Missed my time in Effingham, and a lot of good people back there.
Well, you have a good one, sir, and we'll be in touch.
All righty. Thanks, fellas.
Thanks, Will.
All right. That was, again, Will Bartlett, Effingham native, although it's been a while since he's been in town. But yeah, if you're familiar with basketball in this area, from a certain time, Dave Bartlett's name is going to resonate with you. And that's a pretty good segue for our next guest, because I'm sure that as a expert on National Trail Conference basketball and a lot of other things, Kurt Becker probably has a memory or two about Dave Bartlett.
Expert.
Oh yeah, I think that's how we bill Kurt. Anytime we mention him on the radio, he's an NTC historian. He picked on me as the NTC historian. Kurt, how's it going?
Fellas, it's good to be on the show with you. Congratulations. I don't know that I've talked to you since the launch of the podcast, but it's fantastic. It provides a great format to talk about local and area sports and a few other things as well.
Well, we thought with the NTC boys basketball tournament getting set to start tomorrow that, who better to have on the show than Kurt Becker, guy who might have a thing or two to say about National Trail boys basketball. I don't know. You might have some feelings about it.
Well, guys,
I will say this, Mr. Becker.
Yes, sir.
We had already reached out to you, and my dad sees me like the next day and he says, hey, he'll always say, hey, I got an idea for a guest for you. He says, how about Kurt Becker? I said, hey, he's already scheduled. He's going to be.
Well, I appreciate that, guys. It's fun to get a chance to come on and talk about the National Trail Conference, and in particular the boys basketball tournament. Here's an event that goes back to the Great Depression. I mean, it started at a time when the country and the area around Central Illinois was really struggling in terms of the economy, and yet that was the background in which the tournament began. The thing, guys, that strikes me about it, when you sit down and look at it now, as someone who likes history, I've had to readjust my thinking on this, because the membership of the conference has changed so much in the last 10 to 12 years.
Like an accordion.
It really has. And you've had some traditional longtime members of the conference that have either consolidated or formed sports cooperative agreements. You've had a longtime member in Teutopolis who departed the conference about 10 years ago, but then you've also had an influx of former Midland Trail Conference schools. And thankfully, I'm an old NTC guy, but with that said, I'm grateful for the fact that those Midland Trail schools came along and took an interest when they did. I've told people I celebrate the history of the teams that we were fortunate to have in years past, like Teutopolis, and also at the same time welcome the new blood into the conference, because I know those schools, they want to be here. And I think that says a lot for the history of the National Trail, the fact you've got so many schools that want their chance to be involved in a tournament of this nature.
Yeah, this is the 86th year of the tournament, and I was trying to explain to my daughter a little bit about how conferences work and how it could have gone on for this long. And she said to me, she's like, well, with these new teams you brought in, like, how do you know that the conference is still going to be around in a few years? And I said, well, you look at this core group of schools that have been in it, I mean, forever basically, and it just fits for them. Like, where else are they going to go? And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that it's the perfect place for a lot of the schools that are in it.
I will say that when Teutopolis left at the conclusion of the 2012 season, I hated to see them go because they had brought so much prestige to the conference. I remember when I was in college, I started to college right around that era when the Teutopolis boys had the unbeaten team that won the state championship. And when I was getting to know other students on campus, I went to school at Southern Illinois at Carbondale. And so often one of the icebreakers was if I would try to tell them where Altamont was, my hometown, I could put it into context pretty quickly if I said to them, well, we play sports in the National Trail Conference. For example, Teutopolis is one of the teams. And right away, because of what that T-Town boys team had accomplished, a number of those students would say, oh, wow, gosh, that must be a tough conference. At the same time, I think as a resident of Effingham County, I've been proud to see what T-Town's been able to do in the time since they've stepped out of the conference. Basically, I think their needs changed as their program evolved over the years. And I take pride in picking up the newspaper, turning on the radio, and seeing the level of competition they play, how they seem routinely over the last several years to be able to knock off schools with much larger enrollments that have statewide traditions of their own. So I think it ended up being really a win-win deal for everybody involved.
Yeah, because
and I know at the time I was on the staff over there with Andy. A lot of people, I guess, when you would talk to people about the move, I felt it was time. I mean, but the one thing I think that people would say, oh, we're going to miss the tournament. I mean, that was on the Franklin T. That was the one negative about making that move is people would say, oh, we're going to not be playing in the NTC tournament anymore, because the championship night at the NTC, it's a special night. It really is. I mean, it's a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it almost every time I've been there. But it's quite the evening.
It is, and it's so much fun because for a lot of us, that might be the one time all year that we get to cross paths with certain people, or at least to see that diversity of people from these various schools all in one setting. And it's fun to have a chance to renew those friendships. I know that you think back about the fact that one of the comments that I heard from some of the older fans at Teutopolis at the time that they left the conference. I had a number of folks who said, J.H. Griffin, who played such a key role in developing the boys basketball program at Teutopolis, was really the driving force that helped form the National Trail Conference itself. There were other people involved, certainly, but J.H. Griffin was really, it seems, you always kind of need that catalyst in the room. And he was the guy that seemed to bring everybody together and say, this conference and this tournament need to happen. And I know that, the people at Teutopolis, they're proud of that heritage, and rightfully so. And I know from conversations with them that you're right, Mike, they said they would miss coming to the tournament, and they had a great deal of respect for the fact that conference and that tournament were very important to Mr. Griffin.
Yeah, and it was, and like I said, it was just a case where, almost they'd outgrown it, is where it got to, and it was really, but yeah, just incredible experience. And I'll never forget, my 3 years as a head coach there. I didn't find out until my third year actually coaching in the championship game. And Crawford Kenny always used to joke with me. He goes, it's the championship when the drummers come out. Then it's the championship says, and he says that's when that hair starts standing up on the back of your neck when that drum line comes down on the floor. And it's so cool. It really is. Just little things like that. But my 3 years coaching in it, I'd show up for my first game and there'd be some guy from Altamont always come up and say, St. Anthony's never lost a first round game. I don't know who that would be, Mr. Becker.
Well, I rest his soul. We all knew the late Sam Rickelman, the longtime sports editor of the Effingham Daily News. And,
yes.
Sam did such a tremendous job over the years. And of course, Millie and Dustin became part of that. Mike, your dad on the broadcast side. And it always impressed me how much respect that our media in the Effingham area showed to that event. And I mentioned Sam because I can remember I used to send Sam these little nuggets and tidbits. I would go through the Effingham Daily News archives or the Decatur Herald and Review archives, and I would go back and look at old game write-ups, and I would send notes to Sam. Well, the championship game scoring record is thus and such, or the all-time record for most free throws made in the game by a player is such and such. And Sam, being Sam, and that crusty voice of his, he called me up one day and he said, let me clear this up. He said, the stats are nice, but you've got way too much time on your hands.
That was the abridged version because you cleaned that up. I can imagine what Sam would say there. But no, it is. And I know my he's enjoyed it. He enjoyed it over the years. We had him and Greg talking about before the season started. They talked about how the weather's always crappy at some point during that week. There's always snow or ice sometime during the NTC, and just various stories like that. But you talk about
be okay this year.
No, it looks fine this year, and this year's tournament, it's gonna. You can't say this team will be in the championship, which you could have said many times over the history. You could have picked two teams and got one of them right. I'm not sure you can do that this year.
I think this tournament looks to be as deep as we've seen it in a long time, as far as the ability to really look at various schools in the lineup and say, I can make a case for several of these schools to make it into that championship game and maybe even to win the title. You look at St. Anthony, and they have been on a pretty good roll in this event. They've won the last four, and then for good measure, they even won the championship one-day shootout last year, which was held in when the tournament took a one-year hiatus. And St. Anthony's going to be tough. They're the number one seed, and rightly so. But I agree, guys. You look down the list. There already are teams in this conference that have taken turns beating up on one another this season. And sure. And then the key, fellas, is who has everybody at full strength this week. There always are those issues. I know you guys talked about this. You touched on it in last week's installment about getting everybody healthy, eligible, feeling good at the right time. That will also be a key this week.
Yeah, and again, you don't know. You keep thinking we're getting to a point where we're maybe getting past things, and I don't know. But your games. When I was looking at that, Wednesday, Windsor's 2-star all South Central, as a guy who used to love to listen to Jim Ross. That'll be a slobber knocker. But Altamont and Neoga, they just played overtime, correct, Dustin?
No, that was girls' game.
That was girls. Okay, I'm sorry. But that's going to be a tremendous game. I just saw it on Twitter. I wasn't paying that close attention.
We'll talk about that in a little bit because I was there for that. And
Dietrich North Clay, that's going to be huge. North Clay just beat, rival number one in Flora for the first time they've played, I think, in 10 years. Last night. Now they're going to turn around and play rival number 2 Tuesday night. So,
and like we talked about last week, North Clay's one of those teams, and it hasn't even really been a COVID thing for them as much as just injuries, but they're only now getting their whole team together.
Right.
Windsor Stew Straws and St. Anthony just played Friday night, and St. Anthony won that game. And that was interesting because I think that the Hatchets were back to full strength for that game. It seemed like they had everybody playing, but for the first time in a while. And so, will they gel?
And I think St. Anthony had Craig Croy's back now too, correct?
Yeah, Craig's back. He's still kind of getting a feel for things, I think. He's not starting yet, or at least he hadn't been. I don't know about Friday, but they're working him back in. But you look at Windsor Stew Straws and South Central. I mean, that's a game that South Central just won in the regular season about a week and a half ago. And granted, Windsor Stew Straws was missing some guys in that game. But, having talked to some Neoga friends of mine that were at their game that they beat Neoga in overtime in, they say South Central is just disciplined. They play good basketball and they don't beat themselves. And, for them to be a 6 seed is it says something, I think, about the you just don't know aspect of this tournament field this year.
Well, South Central being disciplined, it's like the ghost of Gary Shirley is back,
Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, like Kurt said, you can make an argument for, probably 6 or 7 teams to win this. You really can. And Kurt, you're going to be there, I'm assuming, this week. I know you probably have that circled.
Going to try to make it out a few nights and take in the games. Not just because Mr. White is part of this panel, but Dustin's alma mater, Neoga. I will say this, if you're Altamont and you're the 2 seed and you drew Neoga in that quarterfinal game, even though Neoga's the 7, I'll guarantee you Coach Nieberge and Altamont are not taking that lightly, because you go back and you look at Neoga in the recent history of this tournament. We're not talking about going back decades. We're talking the last 10 or 12 years. Neoga is one of the most dangerous teams in that quarterfinal round. I don't know what it is. It doesn't seem to matter what kind of year Neoga is having up to tournament week. When they come on the floor, I don't care what their record is. I don't care where they're seated. They always come out ready to play in that quarterfinal game. We looked it up a few days ago. I think like 6 of the last 12 years, about every other year, at least as far as the seeds are concerned, Neoga's pulled an upset in that quarterfinal round. I think that could be as good of a 2-7 matchup as we've seen in that tournament.
As you've ever seen in the tournament.
That's funny that you bring them up, because that was another thing. I mentioned that conversation with my daughter Mackenzie, and she said 86 years. She's like, how many times has Neoga won it? And I said, well, that's a funny question. One time. One time, and it was a really long time ago. But that's kind of the fun of it, is that if you were to pull it off, it would be a huge deal, in around here to do such a thing.
I wasn't coaching with Dave Bartlett at St. Anthony, but I remember when Altamont won for the first time, and had been a long, long time. Didn't they hit like a 3 at the buzzer from the corner?
Correct, Doug Lotch.
Okay. I remember that because I just remember Lyle Casper was coaching, correct?
That is correct. That
there was a picture of him laying down.
Spread eagle.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. I think that was Lyle's first season at the helm at Altamont. And you're right, Mike. Altamont had not won that tournament in 43 years. That was the first time since 1947 that they had won that game. One of the things I remember, and I've never forgiven myself for it, that was when I was in college, and I roomed with Doug Lotch's older brother, Tim. And I had a car, and Tim said, why don't we go home to watch that championship game tonight? I said, I don't know, Tim. I said, it's a long drive home, then a long drive back, and St. Anthony's so tough to beat. And why don't we just hang out here? So as it turns out, poor Tim was not there to see his brother in that incredibly memorable performance, but we ended up, when the game went into overtime, I think that, if I remember correctly, a gentleman from Altamont that a lot of folks know, Dick Francis, an auctioneer that a lot of people got to know throughout the area over the years. Dick, as I recall, this was before cell phones and such, and he called us in Carbondale, and he held his phone up to the radio so we could hear that overtime session. look, I will also say this in fairness to the people of St. Anthony. I've always said if roles were reversed, I would want the full story told. And in fairness to St. Anthony, their leading scorer, Tony Bryant, guess what? He was home listening on the radio as well that night because he had the flu. So to be fair to the Bulldogs, they didn't have their leading scorer, but to be fair to Altamont, they capitalized when they knew they had that opportunity.
Yeah, that's I do remember that. I mean, my last year, no, I would have been gone. And it may have been that tournament. Story because Bart Willenberg had made the all-tournament team, and Sam had gone into the locker room to interview the Bulldogs after the game. They were dressing, and he walked over to Bart, and there's a trophy laying in about 40 pieces in the corner of the locker room. And Sam says, "What's that?" And Bart says, "That's not the trophy I came for." So, and I think it was the next year St. Anthony had the famous 4-point play at the buzzer to send it into overtime or to win it. Send it in overtime.
I think that's right.
Yeah, because we were I was coaching at Hudsonville, and we're at the Little Illini Conference, and we're listening to it in the hospitality room, and St. Anthony had the ball down 4 with 4 seconds to go. And I still remember Dave Scott walking over and turning it off and goes, "Boys, this game's over." And we missed the ending of it. We're sitting there listening to it in the hospitality room. But yeah, just, incredible moments over there. I have the distinction still of blowing the biggest halftime lead in a game there. Now I want to tell you this. I was looking for some stuff and stumbled onto a manila folder my wife had with all the write-ups from my last year of coaching. So in what was a 5-minute job of trying to find something else that I still haven't found, I spent an hour and a half reading articles primarily from you two about games you covered that past year. And, unfortunately, here was the one from the NTC, and, and I'm reading things you're saying and that you're writing about, and I all of a sudden I could close my eyes and I could watch it. It was real. And Mr. Becker, my favorite article was the one you wrote when you went to the Lyle shootout with us up in Chicago.
Sure.
And
that was fun.
That's when no one would play this Lake Forest team, and they were 7 foot, 6'7", 6'7", 6'4", 6'30", and I said, "We'll play them," and we beat them by a point, 1 or 2 points. And no, I still remember that. But I was reading your article and just going back over and things you were saying in the article. It was just a wonderful trip down memory lane, reading some of you and Mr. White's work from back in the day.
Well, Dustin can probably attest to this, that when it comes to the print journalism aspect, one of the things that I learned over the years is once you put something in print, it is there, and it's there for the record for a long time to come. And one of the things that I remember learning back many years ago, Totopolis had been on a roll where they had won 4 consecutive regional championship games, but they had not gone on to win the sectional. Mm-hmm. And I had done a preview, postseason preview one year, and I had used the term failed. I had said Totopolis has won 3 prior regionals in a row prior to this, but they failed to win a sectional championship. And I can remember I was at home listening to an interview with Coach Crawford, Ken Crawford, and Ken Crawford had commented to Greg Sapp in the post-game interview. He said, I got to say something. He said, there was a newspaper article that talked about how my kids had failed. He said, I ask a lot of my kids. He said, my kids are not failures. Let me tell you something. My heart skipped about 10 beats and I lost about 5 years off my life because I thought, oh man. And Ken being Ken, I tell you, he was tough, hard-nosed when he coached. yet he was also very gracious. That's one of the things I always found interesting. I picked up the phone and I called him the next day, and Ken was so kind. He said, no. He said, I wasn't talking about you. He said, I was talking about an article that I read that was written by someone from outside the area. Now I knew he had read my piece, but that was the way Ken was. Ken would make his point, yet he had a way of being firm, but also kind of gracious and forgiving as well, if you would go talk to him about it. But Dustin, I bet in the print journalism aspect, you can identify with the fact, sometimes you sit down and you put something in print, and when somebody says, hey, I went back and read the article you wrote all those years ago, my first thought is often to cringe and think, oh no, what did I say?
Yeah. Well, that very same coach might have cornered me one time about getting his career win total incorrect in a story. I had looked on IHSA's website and just pulled the number from there, and they were missing something, and so he let me know that what the number actually was. That was the year. Well, that was his last year. That was when they went to state with Jason Rundy and those boys.
Why are you bringing this up? You're killing me. Bringing this up.
I still remember also that an umpire one time came up to me and talked to me, and I could to this day I still don't know exactly if he was upset with me or not, but I had said that opposing coach had argued the call to no avail, and I thought it was a pretty innocent thing to say, this was the umpire who was being argued with, and I couldn't. He told me he's like, that's an interesting word you used, to no avail, and I couldn't figure out if he was mad at me or if he just thought it was well.
That was accurate. You're not going to change his mind on the call, yeah, so that was accurate.
But yeah, it is. And then of course you occasionally make people mad for, I've had people from Alney get after me for, for saying Brittany Johnson was, that they could be beaten if you could figure out how to contain Brittany Johnson, which I also felt like is a pretty innocent thing to say, right? But
sure.
Sometimes parents get a little sensitive about things if you're not giving their kid 100%.
I know my first year as a head coach, and we had a game St. Anthony played. I don't know where we played, and get up Saturday morning and here's the paper, and I'm reading quotes. I'm like, I didn't talk to Sam. And Sam would Sam would always say, I'll never make you look bad. I said, no, your quotes are better than when I give you a quote. I said, that was good. It was just an innocent little blurb or something.
I will say that I was green enough at the paper that I would not have dared to pull anything like that. Sam had a little more goodwill built up than I ever managed to get. But I've never set out to make a coach look bad, but by the same token, it was always going to be a direct quote.
Yeah, no, it was he was good to work with.
That's one of my favorite quotes from an NTC tournament, guys. It goes back to when Ken Crawford was at Teutopolis. I remember one night in a post-game interview, they had won yet another championship, and I had commented to Ken. I said, and it was fairly late in his career, and I had said something to the effect of, where does this rank among memorable games during your reign at Teutopolis? And Ken, with that Southern Illinois sense of humor of his, he replied, okay, first of all, he said, please don't say that it's been my reign as coach at Teutopolis. He said the last time somebody talked about a guy who reigned, they found him face down in a mud puddle.
So, I don't want to keep you on too long, Kurt. I don't want to take too much of your time, but
I have a question for Kurt.
Okay.
This is not NTC related. Anytime I'm dialing around the TV and see a Barrett Jackman auction, I have to stop and see if you're there. Now, do you still work those?
On occasion. I don't work for them on a regular basis. Essentially, what I do is when they get into a bind and if they need the help, they'll call me. So, for example, they're getting ready during NTC tournament week. Barrett-Jackson has their Super Bowl, their biggest classic car event, which is the one in Scottsdale, Arizona. I no longer work Scottsdale for them, but what will happen is as we go later in the year, if they get into a bind at one of their other venues, they will occasionally pick up the phone and say, hey, can you come and work? And I think a lot of that comes down to scheduling and availability, because it seems like, and you guys know how this goes in the broadcast business. I don't know how you all get all the games covered that you do. I tell Greg Sapp this all the time at Premier Broadcasting. I don't know how you do it. And I know that sometimes there will be fans from schools that will say, well, why can't you cover our school? Or why didn't you cover such and such game? Well, you look at Premier, there they are in Effingham. They are an Effingham-based broadcasting company. And right there, you've got the public school, you've got the parochial school, you've got Topless, that's a perennial state power just a couple of miles away. And it's tough. Like Greg has often told me, believe me, I wish we could cover all these games out there. Well, it's kind of the same as a freelancer when you announce trying to juggle the schedule, keep everything free. So we fell into a situation where my schedule didn't always, as time went on, line up with Barrett-Jackson and vice versa. But they're still kind enough to pick up the phone when they need the help, and they'll give a call.
So your job there is not to ever be an auctioneer. You're a pointer.
Exactly. My title is announcer. So I essentially am the person that when I do work for them, it's up to me to take a look. I've got a description of the car that's on a computer monitor in front of me, and it's up to me just to kind of go down the line and pick out what I think are the bullet points. I've always said when you're the announcer at a car auction, a horse auction, less is more. Auctions are to create almost a sense of chaos, and you've got to let the auctioneer keep a solid pace going, because the idea is you want people to feel that need, that urge. Man, I better get in and I better bid right now before this car or this horse is gone. So if the announcer starts droning on and on and on, it kind of sucks the air out of the room. So that's always my advice to anybody who wants to announce at a classic car auction. If you know cars, that's great, but make sure that you keep it down just a couple of quick bullet points, jump in, make your point, get out of the way, and let the auctioneer do his work.
See, I've only ever seen you pointing when someone's bidding, kind of helped me. So I thought, man, Becker gets paid, because you're never on camera when you're announcing. You're only seeing the car. They're pushing the car on or the rollers, and I keep thinking, man, Becker's got this great job. He goes to Arizona and he just points.
Well, there are so many folks here in Effingham County that enjoy classic cars, that own classic cars. I'll guarantee you guys, when you go to that NTC tournament, I'll bet you guys can look around that gymnasium. You'll spot people that have classic cars. I mean, I've known of guys in this area, men and women that own Hemi cars and the old Plymouth Superbirds, and you'll see these things roll across the block at Barrett-Jackson. They'll bring 100,000, 150,000, and so often I've thought to myself, I know some folks back home that have cars like that. You bet.
Well, and I saw I thought you were working at the auction when Dr. Workman bought a car, because Bubba Watson, his buddy, comes running down and giving him the glad hand after he made the purchase. And so that's neat that you get to do that. And again, I know with all your horse racing, we'd be here a month talking about that. But no, I just always found that interesting. My dad said, "Hey, Kurt's at this event. Well, if you happen to see it," and then when I see it, I said, "Well, Dad, all he does is stand there and point at people."
So let me circle back to NTC.
Yes, sir.
You've obviously seen a lot. Any particular moment from the tournament that if somebody, I'm sure you get asked all the time, like what's the thing that sticks out in your mind the most from the NTC tournament? Do you have a go-to answer to that question?
I think that probably the first one that always comes to my mind is the one I touched on earlier, being an Altamont native and listening to that 1990 championship over the telephone, rooming at school with the guy whose brother had the game-winning shot at the buzzer in overtime. That's probably the one that initially will come to my mind. I tell you, the other one goes back many, many years ago when I was a child. And I can remember my dad was very, I would almost call him ecumenical. He grew up in Altamont. He graduated out from Altamont High School, but he was the kind of basketball fan. He respected all of the various programs in the conference. And part of that was he had taught at Beecher City at one time. He had taught at Teutopolis briefly. He had built a business in Effingham, and a number of the contractors that physically built the building were members of St. Anthony of Padua. And it just, as a result, Dad had a lot of involvement with a lot of the different communities involved in this conference over the years. So I can remember when I was a kid, I was 7 years old, and Altamont was playing Teutopolis for the National Trail Conference Tournament Boys Basketball Championship, 1976. And it was a good game. It was tight. It was tight all the way. And it got down to the fourth quarter. I remember the crowd on both sides. The crowd was so loud. I mean, I was 7. I had never heard just noise and volume level, decibels like this. It was overpowering. And in the fourth quarter that night, an Altamont player whose name was Greg Milster, Greg had thrown an elbow, and it was not intentional, but when he threw the elbow, he accidentally hit Mark Crake, who was one of the Teutopolis standouts at that time. He accidentally hit Mark right in the face. And I mean, Mark's nose started to bleed, and I mean, there's blood coming down the jersey. And as I recall, I learned years later, many years later, I learned that Mark Crake told his coach, Lawrence Carey, "You're not pulling me out of this game." And of course, rules governing the situations with blood and so on were different back then. So Mark stayed in the game, and Mark just absolutely rattled off like individually himself, like an 8-0 run or a 10-0 scoring run. And Greg Milster, who's gone now and left us far too soon. I remember talking to Greg one time about it. Greg said, A, that was not intentional. And he said, Mark knew that. He said, we had no problem. B, Greg said, intentional or unintentional, worst thing that could have happened, even though it was an accident. Because he said, Mark absolutely got this look in his eyes. And he said he became unstoppable. I remember that particular championship game from 76, huge crowd as always. Altamont trying to win it for the first time at that time in nearly 30 years. And then Teutopolis with Mark Crake having that big performance down the stretch. That's a memory that's always stuck with me.
I think, the crowds, the big concern when T-Town left was, to me, would people still come out? Because you could always count on, for one thing, they kind of knew there was a pretty good chance T-Town end up in the championship game. And so those people would be there for every game. There's people that would, some of those T-Town guys would just come out and watch the entire tournament. But I think it's still been good. I think the new members have brought pretty good followings. I mean, the atmosphere hasn't suffered one bit, in my opinion.
I've watched the championship online a couple times, and crowds have been really good.
They have, Mike, and it's really amazing to me to watch. We talked earlier about the changes that the conference has gone through in membership, and look, there are challenges to forming a sports co-op among schools that were rivals for decades. There are challenges when a consolidation is actually involved. You look at the schools that for many, many years, dating back to the 50s and such, were members of a different conference that have only been in the NTC for the last 5 to 10 years. Seeing how, regardless of those circumstances, all of those communities, all of those fan bases, those players and those coaches, how much they look forward to this event and how much they enjoy being part of the event, it is really gratifying for any of us to see that grew up in a traditional National Trail Conference school. And the whole thing, Mike, you touched on it just a minute ago, the ability now to, if you can't make it in person, obviously we want everybody there that can get there, but sometimes circumstances don't allow that. And when one can tune in and listen to the radio broadcast and also see the video feed that now goes with that, a big shout out to our friends at Premier Broadcasting, because man, that takes a lot of work. I mean, those have got to be some long days. I know for some of the staff, the broadcast day really starts before sunup, and then you're at the tournament until nearly 10 o'clock at night. Then you repeat that cycle day after day all week long. But it's appreciated, and it really adds an extra special dimension to the tournament.
Yeah, Wayne Moran was the guy who got the video aspect of that going back when he was a full-timer at the station. Our guy CJ Schmidt is going to be handling it now. I think Wayne might be there just for old time's sake. I think he might be there tomorrow night. But other than that, CJ is going to take care of it, and Caleb, another one of our guys. That's the thing. It's going to take the two of them to get the video portion of it going, and obviously Greg and Matt are going to be there. Matt's going to have a real, even more of an interest than usual in it, because Mason's such a good ball player and Altamont is such a good team. I think there's every bit of a good chance that you could see Altamont playing on Saturday night for the title. But like we talked about, handicapping this thing, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to tell you to watch and really enjoy the hell out of it, because I think it's going to be a great tournament this year.
I think, Mr. Becker, my plan is to come over Tuesday night. So if I see you there, I may let you buy me a popcorn, just, for all the angst you used to put on me as a coach.
It was always fun to cover your teams, Mike, and always appreciated the fact that you, like our coaches in the area through the years, it seems like we've always been fortunate to have coaches that have been available for interviews and to offer their insight. And guys, I've enjoyed the chance to come on and join you here this evening. I'm with you. It's tough to pick the team, to go out on a limb and say, I will definitively say Team X is going to win this thing. So I'm like you. I'm just looking forward to a great week of basketball. I think it's going to be very competitive, and it should be a lot of fun.
Well, Kurt, we appreciate you taking the time. We got a little bit of local stuff to try and cover before I got to get my kids to bed tonight.
Or I go to bed. That Rams game took it out of me today.
Well, wasn't it? I haven't watched much of the playoffs, but that game was something else. But we appreciate you taking the time. I'd love to have you on again sometime. And also appreciate you saying that you watch. You're one of our ground floor people. Hopefully, if it ever takes off, we can go back and say, well, we heard Kurt Becker reference one of our previous shows, and that was quite an honor to know.
You'd be like Larry Bud Melvin or something.
To know that a real broadcaster, a very successful person in the business, is paying any bit of attention to us at all. Yeah. It's pretty humbling and nice to hear. So, Kurt, really do appreciate it.
Well, guys, keep up the good work. It's a fun show, and you get good information out there, and you make it enjoyable for the guests. I've had a good time coming on, so hope to see you guys at the tournament, and we'll talk some more basketball soon.
All right, sounds good, you, Kurt. Thanks,
guys. See you.
All right, we'll give Kurt a chance to log off, and thanks again to him for joining us. Great to talk to him. We'll do it again sometime. Mike, we've been going for a while, so we can kind of do an abridged version of what we normally do. We've got our attaboy to hand out tonight. If I was going to briefly talk about the week that was in local basketball, the NTC girls tournament was this week, and it was a really good one. Cowden Herrick Beecher City, the number 1 seed, having only lost 1 game all season long, prohibitive favorites to win that thing, but that's not how it turned out. In the semifinal round, Altamont nipped them 60-53 in 2 overtimes, and in the other semifinal, the 2nd seeded Neoga, which had just lost to number 3 seeded St. Anthony a week prior in their regular season game, and quite honestly got humbled in that game. I was at that one, and St. Anthony took it to them, came out and landed the first couple punches, and it was over after the first quarter for all intents and purposes. Neoga turns around and gets St. Anthony in the semifinals 44-31. Which sets up a couple of things. First of all, St. Anthony bounces back and gets the third place win over Cowden-Herrick Beecher City by a pretty impressive 60-47 score. So first of all, shout out to Aaron Rios and the Bulldogs for bouncing back and getting a very big win over a quality opponent in the third place game. But then
State ranked.
Neoga beats Altamont 64-58 in the championship game. That's the 2 seed versus the 4 seed, with the 2 seed winning. Double overtime again. So the Altamont girls over the course of 2 games got to play an extra 16 minutes of basketball. And I'm telling you, I haven't been to a game in person for 2 years that had the atmosphere that game in Beecher City had last night. You get the fans back in. Altamont's got a very vocal student section that really brought the atmosphere. An outstanding player in Grace Nelson. She was named the tournament MVP on the losing side of things, scored 34 points, I think, in that game for Altamont. But Neoga figured out a way to get it done. And, I was there admittedly as a Neoga fan, but impartially watching that game, just a heck of a game to watch and a ton of fun. The NTC, and really you look at the scores from that tournament this week, it was a really, really good tournament. And hopefully, the boys tournament can be as competitive and unpredictable in the second round as this one was.
Well, I think that one, the boys tournament's going to be as competitive and unpredictable potentially in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
I really do.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just going to be a whale of a tournament. You touched on Grace Nelson being named MVP of the tournament. We've had some people always at Christmas wonder why we don't have an MVP, because I think a lot of people think it has to come from someone on the winning team.
Yeah.
Okay. And Grace Nelson, there was probably clear cut. She was the best player in the tournament.
Yeah.
And I think it's disingenuous if you say, well, her team got second, or let's say she had gotten fourth and still averaged 34 points a game in the tournament. There's some people say, oh, well, you can't give it to someone that didn't win the tournament. But that's a great job of giving it to, in essence, they're what they felt was the best player in the tournament. So I always kind of am leery of hanging that award on someone at our tournament, just because I think sometimes you feel roped in, you got to give it to someone on the winning team. And sometimes that person may not really be the person who should deserve it.
I was fine with it. For one thing, Neoga can't complain too much because they had 3 girls on the all tournament team, and deservedly so. And the other thing that I will say is that, Grace Nelson's the MVP, but quite honestly, a pivotal thing for Neoga to win that game was to figure out how to deal with her in the overtime periods. And I think that all that does is make another feather in the cap of Neoga to get the win. Neoga played kind of an interesting defense on her. It was kind of I talked to one of their assistant coaches after the game. He said they triangle and two'd her, but it was kind of a modified version of it. They had one primary defender on her, and then another person just kind of trailing and sagging off and helping with it, right? But the primary defender fouled out either late in the fourth quarter or early in the overtime. And another girl came in, and of course now the Allison Sampson was her name, a sophomore, had to come in the game and guard Grace Nelson, and she did a hell of a job. And it's nothing against Grace. Grace is an awesome player, unparalleled talent as far as the NTC goes, I think. And yet this sophomore comes in under pressure, only having to do it because somebody else fouled out of the game. And I quite honestly think she might have been the difference in those overtimes, because Nelson didn't really get a shot out of their offense during those 2 overtime periods. So I just wanted to give her a shout out. I thought that was, one of those things that her name's not going to show up in the box score. She didn't score any points, maybe, or very few points, but those are the things that can mean a big win for a team. And I thought I needed to get that out there. But we can move on. The Effingham boys got the consolation championship down at Salem, which is doing something. Okay, that's a good tournament. They lost to Madison in their opener, but then turned around and having to win 2 games in the same day, beat Thornton Fractional North 65-38, and then Champaign Central 58-41. So not just squeaking out a couple of wins, but beating teams pretty soundly. And Garrett Wolf had himself a pretty nice day on Saturday, so that was good to see for them.
I listened to some of their Madison game, their first night. That would have been what was that, Wednesday? Thursday. I listened to part of that game on Thursday night, and sounded like the Hearts just hit a dry spell where they couldn't score. They were kind of playing with Madison, then all of a sudden they couldn't score. Madison ended up getting 4th. They lost to Mount Vernon in the semis, and then Salem beat them pretty handily in the 3rd place game. So, but that's good for the Hearts. I mean, beating Champaign Central. I know they're not the Champaign Central of the last couple of years, but that's still a feather in your hat. That's a good win for the Hearts, and it's hardware. Obi brought home a piece of hardware, which is good.
Yeah, like I said, going to Salem and winning your last game on Saturday is doing something. It's always a field, where you're challenging yourself to go play in it. Garrett Wolf, again, 30 points in the first game Saturday, 18 in the second game. Another thing to bring up is that a former Attaboy of the Week winner for us, Logan Heil, scored 10 points in that Champaign Central game because Braden Powell's, another person that we have recognized on this show, was injured. Not exactly sure what that means for Braden. I don't know much about it at this point, but Logan stepped up as he has done at other times this season, and had a nice game there. So that's what Effingham needs. They got to get it from more than one guy, and it sounds like on Saturday at least, they had some guys step up and stand out. So that was good to see.
That's good. T-Town went to Centralia Friday night.
Yeah.
Just a strange game. I was texting with one of the players' parents, and I saw a score of 15-12 at the half.
Yeah.
And they were kind of complaining. I guess Centralia's been a little more deliberate than normal this year. They tend to hold the ball a little more. But then, T-Town only scored 10 points in the second half. Got me 40-22 or 42-22.
42-22 was the final on that.
Yeah. I've got to find out a little bit about that. I know Centralia is going to be pretty good defensively. They got some quick kids that can cause some problems. But that one just shocked me. And then Shoes turned around Saturday, played Shelbyville.
Care of business there. 70.
Yeah, they really took care of business there. Bulldogs had Windsor Stew Straws, got that win.
Yes. 10 points, 52-42. They had beaten Flora earlier in the week also.
Right.
And then they played St. Joseph Ogden on Saturday, lost that one by 12. St. Joe Ogden, we talk about challenging yourself with your non-conference games, and that's just another one,
Cody gets it. He knows. He's beefing their schedule. You got to keep a strong schedule to pay off in the postseason, and that's good. Good game. The Pence kid, they may not face an individual player that strong in the postseason, that good of a player. So you just don't know. But good week there.
And T-Town girls, they've been in Highland and got 5th place. They won the 5th place game. Yeah. So they started off that tournament a week ago Saturday and beat Collinsville, and then they played a very tough O'Fallon team Monday night. Got beat 49-35 there, but then turn around and beat Troy Triad 52-33 and Breeze Mater Dei 36-26 in the 5th place game. And I don't know anything about Mater Dei's girls team.
Anytime you beat Mater Dei, anything.
Yes, absolutely. That's just a good rule of thumb, I think. I think it's the same way people look at T-Town, quite honestly. It's like
it is. There's no doubt about it. Like I said, so I think that's a good week. A little outside the area. I saw Matt Toon beat Payne to win the Litchfield tournament. Sam Bradbury, the 6'7", 6'8" kid for Matt Toon,
Yes,
is now back playing, but he's limited 2 or 3 minutes a quarter is what he's able to play.
Well, that was, that was unfortunate to hear that he was being limited, that he was not able to play for a while there. I mean, from their team's aspect, obviously, because he's an important part of the team, but also just you hate to see a kid be told, that you can't do the thing you want to do,
Right. Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing is they get a handle on what he's dealing with. To where they don't have the scary situation they had around Christmas time. Anytime you got a player spend a night or two in the hospital is not fun.
Yep.
And I know Ryan, it was,
I'm sure that's an emotionally difficult thing for the entire team to deal with.
Especially with your seniors. I mean, your seniors, you've been with them. You hate to see a senior have anything get in the way their last year. I remember my second year at the Topless, Blake Taylor tore an ACL up at Toledo Unity, and it devastated our team, Dustin, to be quite honest. Yep. That team should have been playing for a state championship that year. And to have that part taken out, and he was really our sixth man, just for various reasons, but it upset the whole apple cart. And then we had other injuries throughout the year where kids were never the same, and you just hated to see it, and we worked so hard with him and got him, at least he got to be back on the floor a few seconds in a regional final, things like that. But it wasn't the same. Yeah, it wasn't the same, but that's tough on your seniors. And I'm glad that he's back playing a little bit. Matt Toon's won, I think 5 of their last 6, 5 in a row, 6 of their last 7.
Yep, they're up 12-9 on the year. So, yeah. One other thing, I don't want to not mention the Effingham girls because they had a good week. Right. They went to the Vandalia round robin tournament and ran the table. They beat Vandalia, they beat Centralia, they beat Greenville, and they beat Mascoutah. De facto championship game there, beat Mascoutah by 7 points, and that was the closest game. I mean, they are up to 16-6 on the season. You look at the Apollo Conference standings and you see Effingham kind of in the middle there at 3-3. And if you just judged it based on those numbers without looking at what the conference looks like this year at the top, you would say, well, that's a so-so team, but that's a good Effingham team. It's just that Matt Toon and Lincoln and Muhammad are all awesome too. So there's a lot of tough games in that league. And Taylorville's no slouch either. So
when they're healthy.
Yeah. When they can actually play their games, that's true. But Jeff's got them going 16-6. I say that to we won't go real in depth on the week that's coming up. Obviously, the NTC boys tournament is probably going to be what we spend most of our time next week talking about on this show. But also the Effingham and T-Town girls will play Friday night. And, I always look forward to broadcasting that one. I get like 2 or 3 chances to do play-by-play on basketball on the radio. And that's always one of them because Matt and Greg will be busy over in Altamont. But I think that Effingham T-Town girls game this year has the makings of a fun one. There's some years where you go into it and you kind of know maybe who's got the advantage, but this year I think it's going to be a really solid ball game. Really, I wouldn't want to pick it.
Where's it at this year, Wendy?
I believe it's in Effingham this year.
Okay.
I believe so. Yeah. I remember looking. I always look. It's mostly because I always have to think about how much time it takes me to get there and get set up, T-Town adds a few more minutes to the trip for me by the time I go to the station and pick up all the equipment. But pretty sure I remember looking it up and seeing that it was in Effingham this year. But I'm looking forward to that. It should be a good matchup. I don't know. We've gone on for a pretty long time. So next week we'll obviously be talking NTC boys tournament a bulk of the time, but we got one more piece of business to take care of, Mike, and that of course is who's gonna take home the honors for the Attaboy of the week. And we mentioned this young man already. Effingham went down to Salem and got a couple of big wins on Saturday. And Garrett Wolf, and there's two things I want to say here. Garrett Wolf had outstanding performances, scored 30 points and 18 points in their 2 games Saturday. But what I really like to see is that Garrett has had to work so hard to get just probably to back where he feels good on a basketball court. He had that injury in the offseason that, quite honestly, from the sound of it, if it had happened to me, I would have probably just I would have stopped doing anything. I probably would have.
We may both still be in the fetal position.
Yeah, like the fact that he's playing basketball at all is doing something, let alone scoring 30 points in a tournament game. So this felt like a pretty good time to shout out Garrett Wolf, not just for his performances this weekend, but just for being out there playing hard and getting himself back in the mix.
We may have to have he's a one tough son of a gun award too, because for what he's dealt with his leg and his shoulder. I mean, and Whitey, it's funny at the Christmas tournament. Who was I talking to? Well, it was George Montgomery. They played Brooks in their second game, I think.
Yeah.
And he goes, Mike, I didn't know about what this kid was dealing with until after the game. He's diving on the floor for loose balls and sliding into our bench. And he goes, I was like, oh my God, when I heard that after the fact.
Yeah.
I said, he's a pretty tough kid, George. So
it's quite a story. It's really saying a lot about him that he's out there, because I think I don't know, but I'm guessing that he's probably been told, by doctors or somebody else that, it'd be okay if you didn't, it'd be okay if you didn't play. It might be better if you didn't.
Not, to be honest, yes.
But there he is. He's out there. And so for that reason, Garrett, this one goes out to you.
Attaboy, Luther!
There we go.
And I may reach out to Obi, because we haven't delivered our prize yet to our honor yet to Mr. Powell's. Maybe you could kill 2 birds with 1 stone there. And again, we haven't mentioned last couple of times, Whitey, this award is brought to us by our friends at Joe's Pizza and Pizza Man.
Yes.
The Trupiano family and the Addis family have both taken kind of the sponsorship role with this. And I do have my picture from Logan Fleener. I'm going to post that tonight. I have to see how the end of this Kansas City Buffalo game is going to go. I'm watching with one eye.
All right. Well, we'll let you do it, because we've been on for like an hour and a half, and
this is our record show.
It is, but 2 guests. I'll probably put some timestamps in the post just to let people know who they can catch where and all that.
Yeah.
So we thank both of those guys for jumping on with us.
Oh, heck yes.
Real pleasure to talk to both of them, and love to do it again. But Mike, enjoy the end of that football game. Enjoy your evening and enjoy your week, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. See you, Whitey.
All right. Take it easy.